Welcome, everyone. This year we decided to do something a little different for our Freetober offering. Every year since we've started, we've offered some of our episodes or some of our content for free in the month of October. Big fans of Halloween and consider it you knocking on our door and us giving you a treat. This year, though, we decided to put up a poll and let the listeners vote as to what they wanted. The options originally were a free episode or a free interview. Well, interview won. So we put up a poll and let you choose who you wanted to see. And we've listed all the interviews that we have done, and by a very clear margin, Bruce Vilanch was the winner. So we hope you enjoy this interview that we did with Bruce Vilanch. If you do, consider becoming a member of our Patreon, or subscribe to our YouTube channel here, and at least you'll be able to see all the content we put forth. And please remember to turn on the bell, because for some reason, with YouTube's new algorithm, that matters. Once again, thank you for participating in the poll and voting for Bruce Vilanch. Without further ado, here's the interview. My guest is Bruce Vilanch. Bruce, welcome.
Hey there.
Bruce, you're a legend. Yeah. You're a legend in Hollywood. You've written for so many celebs. I don't think there are many in the industry who haven't had you in their mouths.
Exactly. Well, that was a line that I think I gave Bette Midler, who I've been working with for 50 years, which is Clutch the Heart. When I got an award some years ago, and she said, Bruce has put more things in my mouth than any man. Or something like that. It was a joke like that. And I'm glad
it's actually exactly the line.
Time. Thank you. Mm-hmm. You have excellent taste.
Well, if you're going to steal, you should steal from the best. Okay, so this interview is going to be a mishmash of a couple of different things because as we were leading up to it, my idea for it has evolved. It was going to be a straightforward, hey, get to know you and everything that you've done. But there's a couple of things that I want to ask you about after watching Get Bruce and how the climate of comedy and everything else has changed. I won't say grown, changed over the years.
Changed. Yes. It's a minefield now.
Let's start at the beginning. You were born in 1948 on November 23rd during a blizzard.
Well, that's Wikipedia. They've given me, they shaved a year off. It was 1947.
Okay.
And I haven't bothered to correct them. I live in Hollywood, and the younger you are, the better you are.
Yeah, you don't want to add time on there. But I know you credit your mom as a big source of not only your sense of humor, but also your love for theater in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I was adopted when I was 4 days old, and my mother was she was a showgirl. She danced and she was in shows and things, but she was not famous or did not Broadway. But she married a doctor, and they adopted me some years later, and she always had this thing that she loved show business, and she wasn't like Mama Rose. It wasn't like pushing me. And once they discovered that I was happy performing and making faces and singing and doing things like that, they encouraged it because I was happy doing that. But they never made any money off of it. But the atmosphere at home was full of performance and theatrics. And my father, who was a doctor and very solid, couldn't believe he had these two people dancing around his house that were just always joking and doing that kind of show business kind of stuff. And then when only recently I discovered my birth mother, who's been dead for years, but. And her subsequent children, and they showed me all this stuff. In addition to looking just like her, she had a fabulous sense of humor and a weight problem. And on her gravestone, it says, "Here dies Dolores, thin at last." So I thought some of that has to have seeped in genetically, and then I'm nature and nurture because I got both. I got it from both sides. Fortunately, the message was the same from both mothers.
Well, the impression that I got from watching Get Bruce, which my audience can go check out on Amazon Prime,
It's there.
the impression that I got from Get Bruce is that your house was filled with love.
Yeah, it was. I was an only child, and I was doted on. And but my mother she was a very controlling personality, and she's in Get Bruce, and she's hysterical. She and Robin Williams are the stars of that movie. It is a movie from 20 years ago that was made about me and deconstructing comedy, basically. And Whoopi and Billy Crystal and Bette Midler and Robin Williams are the principals, but a lot of other people along the way. And it was produced by Harvey Weinstein, who never laid a hand on me.
I don't think you were his type.
Why not me?
Actually, my favorite bit of that is you and Billy Crystal going back and forth.
Yeah, we were having a great time, and we had a great time. Whenever we worked together, we had a great time. He is about to conquer Broadway again. He's doing a musical of Mr. Saturday Night, which I'm not involved in, but I have a feeling it will be a big hit.
Now, you were drawn to the theater and entertainment industry from a very young age. What was the biggest pull to the industry for you?
That was a great question. I mean, I just always, I just love the glamour of it, and I discovered there is no glamour, but the idea of glamour. And the fun, the idea that you could make people laugh and get paid for it, and have fun doing it, as opposed to working on an assembly line, which I did for a while in the summer to because my parents wanted me to see what real work was like. So I was there, and of course that's where Roseanne came from, right? The whole show comes from that experience, not from me, but from them. But I guess that was the pull of it was the fun. I suppose I was drawn to the bright lights, the neon. In the old days, the movie theaters all had these marquees with these beckoning, fabulous pink and green neon lights that you wanted to go in there because there was another world in there that was that was much more interesting than the one you were in.
No, I understand that well. My mother gave me a love of musical theater. I think one of the few heterosexual males in the Detroit area that absolutely loves musical theater.
They're thin on the ground.
But
my father loved it. I mean, part of the reason I went was my father loved the showgirls, and in fact, that's what attracted him to my mother, I think. But he loved musicals. He was a quintessential tired businessman. He just wanted to be entertained, and so we went to see every show. I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, which was right across the George Washington Bridge when it was open from New York. We would go over and see shows all the time, and he invested money in shows, and so that also drifted down from him. That was one of his passions.
So let me ask you, what was your favorite show you saw as a kid?
Well, not about the favorite. I mean, I had a million of those. The first one I saw was a show called a big flop called The Vamp. It starred Carol Channing. And
I know she wants you to stop talking about it.
And she just says, "Why you keep talking about that turkey?" But there was, it was bright lights and this apparition. She was this huge, saucer-eyed, huge mouth person, and she was like from another planet. And I just wanted to be in her aura. And I love the idea that everything moved and glittered, and it had a rhythm, and it didn't bother me. I didn't realize at the time, I was too young, that it wasn't very good. It was like a bad musical, but still, I guess I'm still attracted to bad musicals. I've written a few, so there you go.
I have an affinity for what everyone calls like B horror movies and stuff like that, like movies that nobody in their right mind would sit down and watch.
You and John Waters.
Yeah, I love John Waters.
You up?
I love John Waters.
Yeah,
I love all of his work.
He's brilliant. He's hysterical.
Do you have a favorite musical, like one that shines a little above the rest of them?
Well, When I was a kid, I mean, I was in the era of the golden age, My Fair Lady and South Pacific and Guys and Dolls, How to Succeed in Business, those kinds of shows. A funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I couldn't pick out a favorite. I mean, those were all like big. And then, of course, I did Hairspray for 2 years. I shaved my beard, and I'm looking at yours enviously because I used to love to let it grow. And but I kept it off after 2 years because people said, "Oh, you look younger," and I said, "All right, I'll take it. Hollywood." So I guess I would have to say Hairspray now because I had so much fun doing it, But
absolutely great. I know I joke with people. Well, not joke, but when I tell people my mother showed me the Rocky Horror Picture Show at 6 years old, they look at me and go, "So that's what's wrong with you."
That's exactly right. That would warp anyone. That would time warp anyone.
Now, growing up, I know you were a chunky kid. You shopped in the Husky section, much like I did.
All this. Excuse me, I'm doing a line. I'm cleaning my keyboard from peanut butter. The only way to do it is to suck it up out of a straw. There you go.
Humor is a defense mechanism, right?
Yeah, to a large part. I mean, when you're a kid, especially. I mean, it's armature. You can make a joke and you can get away fast from. You can run from them. So it's a lot of it's self-deprecating. I mean, things. There are things that are just funny because a lot of humor is absolutely watching pompous people being deflated and taking the piss out of serious stuff. So there's no question about it. I'm sure that a great deal of it is started by people who use it as a defense mechanism.
I think all us former fat kids have a decent arsenal of comedy at our disposal. I look at it as how we punch first to avoid the pain.
Well, yeah. I mean, as Whoopi said, it gives you a head start.
Yeah. Well, actually, this was really evident in watching the acceptance speech at the charity event for AIDS awareness. Seeing you get choked up, but then firing off jokes. I looked at my wife who was watching it with me, and I was like, that's him punching back at the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And also, I mean, I don't want to drag the audience down into some maudlin thing, and because that's not who I am. But we all have those moments where we face reality, and the reality of that situation is that I've lost hundreds of people. I mean, literally hundreds of people.
Well, speaking of charity events, you've got to be one of the single most charitable individuals in the industry. What has inspired you to give back to various causes?
Well, I'm Jewish, and we have a concept called of tzedakah, which is a Hebrew word meaning charity. And of course, Jews, one of the things you learn growing up Jewish is that a lot of people hate you and a lot of people are not going to help you, and you have to do it for yourself. And I always thought that was a great mantra for the gay community as well. And so it comes, I think, partially from that, from growing up in a culture of a tribe that takes care of its own. And then I suppose I was surrounded by kindness. I mean, my family and our friends were treated each other decently, and we're all active in making things better in a semi-global way. I mean, for the community.
Now, growing up as a gay kid in the 50s and 60s could not have been easy.
Well, first of all, there were no gay kids. I mean, that's a new concept. People kept saying to me, well, what about bullying? I said, well, bullying was like a rite of passage. It was coming of age. There was always a bully. It wasn't about, I mean, I was, bullied because I was fat. I was bullied because I was not athletic. I wasn't even gay then. I mean, I wasn't acting out sexually. So I was being bullied for a whole bunch of other reasons because there were bullies, because there are guys who want to pick on other people. So, and there I was to be picked on. So it didn't occur to me there was anything unusual about that. It wasn't pleasant. And a lot of it gets better as you get older or pay no attention to them, or, all of those bandages were put on it. But it wasn't until kids became aware. I mean, I didn't know anybody 10 years old who felt they were in the wrong sex. This is a new development. I've got to tell you. I mean, it's happened. Obviously, they'll bring up historical instances of it. Say you're wrong, and I say I'm happy to be wrong. But in my observation of my generation, when I was growing up, that was not an operative thing. And now it is. So now there are kids who come out and identify very early, and great. They then get picked on for that, and of course we address that now as adults. We address that and try to ameliorate the situation. And I forget what the original question was because I'm going round and round about this. But it was difficult. It was difficult being different. On the other hand, in the 50s and the 60s, there was the beat movement, which filtered down to kids. I mean, I was with a group of people, we all thought we were very hip and very sophisticated, and we identified with beat poets and with that music. And of course, rock and roll was the music of rebellion. It wasn't show tunes. It wasn't the stuff our parents liked, and that's a classic teenage thing. So there was also that kind of weird extended family support group. But it certainly is way different today. There's just no question about it.
Well, I would imagine you're happy to see society has progressed quite a bit, but it's not where it should be. But at least it's progressed quite a bit concerning the LGBTQ community.
Sure. Well, yeah. Listen, I've said for many times it was 40 years from Martin Luther King to Barack Obama. And it was 40 years from Stonewall to marriage equality. And marriage equality came about because so many people wanted to be first-class citizens that they identified as gay and said, I want to be able to have the same rights with my partner that you have with your partner. It was, as King said, the arc of justice. Whatever that line is, it's slow, but 40 years in terms of history is nothing.
No,
in terms of a person's lifetime, it's a lifetime, and but there it is. In both those social movements, have taken in 40 years, a gigantic leap was made.
Hopefully, in 40 years, we'll make an even bigger leap.
Yeah, I mean, yes, probably to another planet, but because we will have wasted this one.
Well, only the people with a decent enough bank account will be able to get to another planet. All us poor people will get left right here on Earth.
Kind of like the Titanic all over again.
Yeah, I make no bones about it. I am never going to see another planet other than Earth.
I'm not all that interested, but yeah, in it. But I agree with you. It's true. It doesn't. I don't feel like I will have been denied the great adventure. That's okay.
No, I don't even like going on boats, let alone put me up into the space where there's no atmosphere, where the tiniest little thing can puncture a hole and I'll die. No, I'm good. Good.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm fine here. It's okay. I'll leave me in the hammock. I'll be fine.
Right. So your mom also helped start your career fairly early, getting you work as posing for a model for Lane Bryant's Charming Chub Child.
I was a charming chub for Lane Bryant. Yes, that's it. Yes.
That has got to be the least.
Lane Bryant was I don't know if they're still around, but they sold to plus size women. And I guess there were not enough plus size women. They decided to go to plus size children. And so they had a line, and we were charming chubs. And then it was graduated to Silas Stouts. But and then I was a husky, and my career ended. So yeah, and we can't find any of that stuff. Although I have buried somewhere in a storage facility, I think the original ad that we did with Carol Lindley, the late Carol Lindley, who was a movie star. She was blonde, gorgeous, and the shiksa of all time. Just like the non-Jewish girl your parents were afraid you would run off with. And so she was posed with fat Jewish kids. And the idea was being, if you if you buy these clothes at Lane Bryant, your kid will get Carol Lindley.
She just came as part of a package deal, buy one, get one.
Yeah, basically. If you bought Lane Bryant, you might get Carol Lindley.
I just, when I read that, I was like, God, they have never, ever had good names or good taglines for larger person clothing. Like, there's no way in hell I'd want to be known as a charming chub.
I know. Well, those were the days. I mean, now it's. I mean, there was a store out here called the Forgotten Woman, and my previous drag experience before Hairspray was on a show that I wrote with Cheech. And it was a series we sold to NBC, the Cheech Show. And Cheech played Cheech. And I was on the show as a woman. He ran a repair shop and he repaired my car. And I was a big Hollywood gossip columnist named Luella Fella. And it was a drag queen with a beard. So it was a woman with a hormone problem, a drag queen with a hormone problem. And there was a Writers Guild strike, and we only shot 3 episodes, and NBC canceled us as part of the strike because we couldn't deliver the rest of it. But we got great numbers the 3 weeks we were on. Anyway, I had to get drag. I had to get outfits to wear, and they took me to the Forgotten Woman because they did big girl fashions. They did plus size fashions, and there was no dress barn in those days. There was no industry of overweight women being designed for. There was it was the Forgotten Woman. They never designed clothes in her size. So we went there, and everything was kind of expensive. But I looked like the mother of the bride. It was always everything matching. But that was what that industry was like. So they had to come up with. That was what they came up with as a name for their customer, the Forgotten Woman.
Nowadays, larger clothing is pretty prevalent, especially for women. I've seen videos on TikTok from this one store that I love their tagline. When you walk in, they say, "Welcome to whatever the store's name is. You got to be too something to do something."
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, we've also moved to another culture where, you look at Lizzo, who wears things that large women would never wear, and she doesn't give a rat's ass.
Well, it's about being comfortable.
Yeah, this is who she is, and she can be. You want to wear a Lycra stretch pants? I'll wear a Lycra stretch pants. I mean, they're stretching over a lot more than they did, when Lauren Bacall wore them. But she's happy, and why not?
Well, there've been quite a few artists. Of course, some of them have backtracked on it, but I remember when Adele first came out, she was very adamant that she was okay with her size, and that if anyone else had a problem with it, they could go get fucked.
Yeah, but then what happens is as you get older, and speaking as an elder stateswoman, you discover that all the health issues that your parents were telling you about were real. Mm-hmm. And the earlier you get yourself in some kind of shape, the happier you will be as you go along. And I don't know.
Round is a shape. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know Lizzo, but I understand the idea of I'm in this for the long haul, and maybe I should just should just consider that. I mean, Cass, who I did know, Cass Elliot, who was a friend of mine, died very young of a heart attack, and it was weight related, and she had issues that I don't think addressed, and it was tragic because she was a phenomenal talent and a great girl, and it was not great.
I get it. Speaking as a man who's about to be 40 and way overweight and has beat his body to hell and back, the weight there does not help.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Okay, so I have to ask, the straws. What is it with the straws?
Suppressed masturbation, that's all. I'd be whacking all the time if I didn't have straws. I don't know. I'm orally fixated. It could be worse. I could be anally fixated, but I'm orally fixated. So I always have something in my hands, and I used to smoke, and that's how but then I realized I was going to die if I smoked the way I was smoking. So I quit, but that was like 50 years ago. And I found straws. I found that they have, can fit there and kind of do all these Betty Davis impressions
Right.
and stuff like that. And I just lit on straws. I don't know why. I mean, I suppose they have too much plastic in them or whatever, and I'm going to have to quit those. But I'll discuss it with Bezos as we're on our way to Mars.
Although being anally fixated and still choosing to use straws would make some interesting noises, I'm sure.
I don't think anally fixated. I don't think those things mean is exactly the same thing in psychiatric terms. I don't know why, but I don't know. So I won't go any further.
Fair enough. So as a teenager, you developed aspirations for becoming a performer after
A porn star. Yes, I did.
a performer after
Unrealized.
Well, I'm sure there's probably a reel or two somewhere.
I was nominated for best non-sexual performance at the Gay Porn Awards for a video that I did called "Fucking with the Stars," which was a bunch of pornos, scenes from porn, and there were three judges: Shishi LaRue, who directs porn, a fabulous drag queen, directs porn, and Coco, another one who's terrific, and we were the judges. And of course, we didn't see anything. I mean, they shot us. We pretended we had been watching stuff. I was bitterly disappointed, which I think I brought to the performance. Like, we aren't really watching this. I was there. I wanted to watch some live action, but no.
In my head,
however, I got a nomination and I lost.
Oh. In my head, I have this vision of the three of you sitting there, MST3K style, just ripping on the porn.
It was very much Mystery Science, exactly right.
But you were a passionate consumer of TV and film for your entire life. Any TV shows that stick out that were really grabbed your attention as a child or as a young individual?
Well, I liked all the fat guys. I loved Jackie Gleason. I liked the Honeymooners, and I loved his variety show. And I loved Bill Phil Silver's Fast Talker. And there were variety specials. I was crazy about those. I guess when I was a kid, I mean, there were a couple of shows that I love that are lost to time. There was a show called Mr. Adams and Eve, which was Howard Duff and Ida Lupino, who were movie stars and a real couple in real life, playing themselves, more or less, as movie stars in Hollywood. And I thought it was hilarious because it was about movie stars in Hollywood. And it's never been revived. Well, they tried to do it. Harry Hamlin did a show, and Lisa Rinna did a show called Movie Star, but it didn't. It wasn't funny. Is part of the problem. But I mean, like everybody else, I watched I Love Lucy and Our Miss Brooks and all of those kind of the sitcoms, and so I kind of grew up in that atmosphere.
Now, I know you went to Ohio State and studied journalism, and I found out at the very beginning of the interview, before we got started, you actually used to work for the Free Press here in Detroit.
I was an intern in the summer of '69, which was Woodstock and the Manson murders, and it was very busy. And I was out in LA actually for part of it, and I was at Woodstock for part of it, and I was in Detroit some of the time too.
Any fond memories of the city?
Well, first I lived at 9 Mile and Coolidge, and I rented a room from an old Jewish guy, which my parents thought was safe. And then a bunch of us who were at the Free Press rented a mansion in Indian Village. And Indian Village at the time was this neighborhood on Jefferson before you got to Grosse Pointe, but it was fabulous mansions that were lived in by automobile executives, and by 1969 they'd all gone out, and they were all just sitting there empty. And so 7 of us got together and rented one of these places. I lived in the ballroom. It had a ballroom. And it was no man's land. I mean, if you walked 1 block in either direction, you were dead. But we were in this little enclave, and I remember down the street, the corner was the Rooster Tail, which was a nightclub that Bette actually played. One of the first places Bette played was the Rooster Tail. And across the river in Windsor, the Top Hat, another one.
I'm going to assume that it was, it's been changed now, because I don't know Indian Hills beyond it being a golf course and an elementary school.
I don't know if it's Indian Village, and it's very urban. I don't know if it's. I would think that what had happened was when the black middle class rose, they got those houses and gentrified them and turned it into a real sort of, I was going to say Cosby neighborhood, but you can't invoke his name at all. But it was that, it was like black professionals, and it would become that kind of a neighborhood.
I'm going to assume it's probably Grosse Pointe Woods at this point.
It could very well be. It could very well be, because Aretha lived in Grosse Pointe. Anita Baker lives in Grosse Pointe. So that may have all overlapped itself. I don't know.
Now, I know from your time in university that led to several theatrical plays as well.
My time in the university led me to what?
Theatrical plays.
Yeah, well, I acted. I was always acting. I was a child actor. I was never a child star, or we'd be having this conversation in rehab. I was a child actor, and I just never stopped acting. So I went to Ohio State for journalism and theater. You could get a dual degree. And so I was writing about the shows, and I was acting in the shows. I was very busy.
Yeah, you were writing reviews for the plays.
I was the critic, exactly. And I didn't review my own stuff, but I, reviewed everything else. And I wrote a column every week about the movies that were opening in town that weekend. And, I was on like screening lists, and it was bizarre because I was a college student. But back in those days, the studios were reaching out to the youth market to see how they could penetrate the youth market, because the youth market had kind of drifted away.
I've heard Hollywood likes to penetrate the youth market.
Yeah, baby.
Well, it also led to your time at the Chicago Tribune, which led to you meeting Bette.
That's when I met Bette. She was on Broadway in Fiddler on the Roof, playing one of the daughters that gets married every night. And she, on her vacation, she played a club in Chicago called Mr. Kelly's, which was a very hip club that was a starting place for Mort Saul, Lenny Bruce, Shelley Berman, and Sarah Vaughan, and it was a very hip jazz sort of cabaret room. And I knew her manager at the time, and he asked me to review her and if I liked her, and I loved her. I thought she was fabulous, and I interviewed her, did a column, and afterwards she liked the column and called me and said that you're very funny, you're a funny writer. I said, you're funny, you should talk more, you should on stage. She said, you got any lines? And that was the beginning. I began writing local Chicago humor for her, which amazed the audience that she knew anything about Chicago. And that became her hallmark when she recorded an album, when she started going out on the road. Every place she went, I would call the TV critic or my opposite number at the newspaper in that town. What's happening in Cincinnati? What can we make fun of? And so she would come armed with material, and they would all go, holy shit, how does she know about that?
Well, that's right, because you subscribed to how many
magazines? When the IRS audited me, I had 67 subscriptions, which we believe they red flagged me. Because they couldn't believe that anybody had that many subscriptions to anything. That's my naive thought. My accountant says, no, you're in show business, and they troll people in show business, depending on the administration.
Oof, that's what are you gonna do, right?
What can I say?
You've had a lifelong friendship with Bette Midler. You wrote her Broadway show Clams on the Half Shell.
Yes.
Can you tell me anything about the process of writing that show for her, or writing it with her?
Well, I write with her all the time. I Midlerize things other people have written, and then her shows always started out with the music, with what she was. What it was generally based around a new album that was released, and we had to figure out how to do a show that would showcase the songs on that album because it was a sales tool. And Clams on the Half Shell was she had took a year off because it was all she'd gotten very big very fast, and when when you take time off, you have to, and you come back, you have to come back with something. And one way of doing it for her would be Broadway because she was such a hot ticket in New York. And originally we were going to do a very small show, but the demand was so great that we made it bigger. We added Lionel Hampton, and so it kind of became we didn't have I don't think there was an album at the time that we were pushing. It was just like conceptual stuff that we had needed to have a funny opening. We needed to have a section where she could do ballads. The second act was about her singing with a big band with Lionel Hampton. So, I mean, that's it's not a fascinating process, but I mean that was how that one was put together. But almost always they were, what am I going to do between these songs? And even to this day, when I don't think she'll tour anymore, but when we put together a show, it's always about the music and how everything is going to connect with songs and with characters that she wants to play in the songs. And we did a piece for Clams, actually. For the show after Clams, we wanted to do a piece about a lounge singer. And so we came up with Vicky Eady, who was like the lounge singer of all time. I mean, a truly lousy performer. And it was a parody of all of that stuff. And that became a mermaid in a wheelchair, Dolores Delago.
Would that have been for Divine Madness?
Yeah, Dolores was for Divine Madness. We were going to do the No Nukes concert. It didn't work out, but we were going to have her as a mermaid strapped to a missile. And then we said, well, what does she do? Well, she's in a wheelchair because she can't walk. So, and that went away, but the mermaid in the wheelchair, the concept remained.
Well, and so that leads me into the line of questioning that I was hoping to be able to get into is, so as a comedy writer, there are jokes that fly, there are jokes that don't fly, and then there are jokes that most people are probably terrified to see whether they fly or not.
Mm-hmm.
I.e., one of the biggest ones was the roast where Ted Danson showed up in blackface.
Yeah.
And that caused a huge problem. I know that was Whoopi Goldberg's idea. I know that you wrote for it, but that it was not your idea. My question is, and I'm sorry for the rambling lead up, what is your opinion of cancel culture at this point? And it's a two-part question. Your opinion on cancel culture, and then follow up, is funny no matter what, no matter who it offends?
Well, it's not funny if it affects you. I mean, I can understand. I mean, I get. I mean, I'm a member of several minorities myself, so I get when they make jokes about the minorities. It depends on the spirit in which they are made, I suppose, and that's. I mean, that's for everybody to judge. I loathe cancel culture because I think that everybody deserves another chance. I mean, they can learn. I mean, there are consequences for things that you say, but cancellation is not the answer for that kind of thing. And I think that there's a pushback to wokeness. I think wokeness is good, but it can be taken too far, and unfortunately, I don't think all victims are to be believed on the face of it. Everything, we have jurisprudence, we have due diligence in this society, where you're not guilty until proven innocent. You are innocent until proven guilty, and I think a lot of that has gotten warped by woke culture. But I also believe that a lot of wokeism is a small, shrill group of people who have keyboard warfare at their disposal, and make more of an impact than they might, and corporate America, of course, is just terrified, and they don't want to be seen in a bad light. And so optics are everything, and so they go to default positions, which are like cancellation. And so it's not a pretty situation. But the good news is that there's some pushback on it, and there will be a balance where people will realize that the parameters have changed. At the moment, it's a minefield because if you make a mistake, it's oh my God, oh my God, you're. I mean, nobody seems to realize that when Whoopi talks about race, she's a black person, and race in 2022, when you mention race, you're talking about black and white. Mm-hmm. The idea that white people persecuting other white people is not racial is because everything that's racial is black and white. So.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I was reading about that this morning, is that she's been suspended from The View. And
it's crazy. I mean, she realized that she made a mistake, and she realized she forgot the bigger picture because she knows all about that stuff. She just forgot the bigger picture. And that's, I think, because in her world, race is a black and white issue, and it's gigantic, and it just doesn't stop.
I think her statement could have been saved by adding just one word.
Yes.
I get the impression. I think the word just needed to be in there. When she said that the Holocaust wasn't about race, I think what she might have meant, and this is just me inferring or whatnot, I think what she meant is it wasn't just about race. I could be wrong, but
the whole thing is a semantic argument because it's about race. It's about the word race.
Yeah.
And the haters jump on. I mean, because she's always been a magnet for hatred. So,
Yeah. I honestly believe if that word just had been in there, nobody would have made a fuss about it, because it would have been acknowledging that there are layers to it.
Yeah, but I think there's a reason the word wasn't in there, and that is because race in her world at this moment is about black and white.
Fair. I use, when I talk about the woke culture on my show, I use something I like to call the pendulum argument. Whereas the pendulum has been pulled back in one direction for so long, and when you let it go, it naturally has to swing all the way back before it falls safely in the center.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's true.
And I think where we're at is we're in that backswing right now, and it needs time, like you said, to settle out.
I think it's a good place for us to be.
In the backswing. Okay, there's something I've got to talk about here. I am a giant nerd, and when I saw that you were responsible for any part of this thing, I had to make it some form of a question or ask. The Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah, that's me. I was there.
How high were you guys?
Well, we were. If you remember the 70s, you weren't there. I mean, that's the basic mantra. And I said we were all chemically altered to a degree. Anybody who just says they weren't kind of baked, who was my age at that point, is lying to you, or they're some kind of they're a Mormon, or they have some other calling that where there was a lot of stuff they were not a part of. I mean, I doubt that Prince Charles was lighting up dudes, but you never know. The thing about that is, when I tell these stories, I mean, people, I get these things. Vilanch, who admits to copious drug abuse, there was not copious drug abuse. I mean, we smoked dope. I mean, it was, I elaborate. I joke that Carrie Fisher and I were snorting the sweet and low. Because I mean, at one point or another, we were snorting something, but it wasn't like disabling addiction for me. So, but the people get mad because they refuse to acknowledge, or they don't understand, that Star Wars was a big deal in show business, but it wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't the religion that it became. It wasn't the Scientology of the nerds that it became subsequently. The first movie was out. It was a big summer blockbuster. People loved it. A lot of people thought it was simple, and it ate the Republic Studios serials, and it wasn't all that brilliant. It was a good ride. And this special was concocted with the idea of that, basically. And George wanted to stir the pot because he was about to start shooting The Empire and he needed to have a little boost in the media. And so he sold him this idea. And I think if he had known that it was, when he sold him an original musical, that he didn't know it was going to be the kind of television special it turned out to be, because I don't think that was his world. And I don't think if he wanted to do an original musical, he would have sold them a story that involved Wookiees as lead characters, creatures who speak no known language and can't move because they're in ape suits and they're gigantic and they sound like fat people having orgasms. Trust me, I know. So I don't think that he was aware of all of that stuff, and he distanced himself from the show as it built, and then another generation discovered the thing 3 movies later when they found it on the internet, and they realized they didn't know what this thing was, and they said, George, how could you betray us with this piece of shit? And it got very serious for him, and so he tried to obliterate it, which couldn't be done because the internet is there. And then he made more movies. And every time he does another Star Wars thing, it comes up again. And at this point, there's he even sold the Star Wars holiday. He let Lego do a Star Wars holiday special on Disney Plus. I think acknowledging that there was such a thing as a Star Wars holiday special. And of course, now among the faithful, it's remembered as the introduction of Boba Fett, and who they've managed to forgive for having such a low birth as on the Star Wars holiday special.
And I'm really hopeful because I've seen that Marvel is getting ready to do a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. And I'm really hopeful it's just a dog turd again. I really do want to see just another terrible holiday special just for the fun of it.
We can't get enough. I mean, really, we can't replay that David Bowie, Bing Crosby thing enough times,
right?
Where they sing "Little Drummer Boy." I mean, they just,
Well, and I think the thing is too is you see these characters, at least in my case, we're many years away from the holiday special and the original Star Wars movies, but when you see these characters and they're outside their normal purview,
yeah,
it's entertaining because we make up stories in our head and what about this or what about that, and this is kind of like somebody's psychotic story in their head put to film.
They don't have their special effects, I mean, they don't have the movie effects and everything looks kind of cheesy. So it's disheartening to people who are really looking for that, to duplicate that movie experience.
Okay, so you write for almost all of the award ceremonies.
I have. I'm the EGOT of award show writers. I've done them all.
And you're still, aren't you, right?
I'm what?
You're still writing for them.
As far as I know.
You haven't gotten that email yet?
I haven't heard yet, yeah.
So what I commented on one of them and I made a dumb joke and your response to me was, what were you smoking? I forget what the joke was, but I've never been super big on the award shows. I don't know why. I enjoy the little clips and stuff that I see, but what is the big draw for award shows?
Well, in the beginning, when celebrities were not accessible on television, it was where you saw movie stars as themselves, not as in character. And it was a big deal. When I was a kid, it was amazing. I mean, to see Susan Hayward as Susan Hayward and not playing some character, or Elizabeth Taylor, this was amazing. And with the proliferation, of course, of everything, there are 7 or 8, 10, 12 talk shows every day where movie stars show up to promote projects. So it's no longer a rarefied event to see that. And when scripted shows became so expensive to do, when it cost $6 million to turn the lights on at Friends every day, because each one of them is getting $1 million a week. So it was, and that was just them. they began looking for alternatives, and the Writers Guild strike did not help. A different Writers Guild strike, because they realized that they could do reality shows for way cheaper than scripted shows, and that has been righted by streaming, which now has a tremendous demand for scripted material. But in the interim, when variety TV went away because of cable and because of SNL, which was freer than anything you could see in prime time, these shows were replaced by spectacles, by awards, tributes, pageants, all that kind of stuff, because it was an easy way to stock a show with a whole bunch of names that would draw people into watch, and it was more cost efficient. And so that's why award shows began proliferating the way they did.
Now, when it comes to the award shows, I'm sure you and the censors have a beautiful relationship with each other.
Yeah, of course. Well, less lately, because they're very most standards have been lowered to the point where, I mean, in order to compete with cable and with the streaming and with everything else, on the internet, they've had to loosen up a lot. I mean, there are certain things that you still won't be allowed, but there's a lot of stuff that is. And it's hard when the way we watch TV now, if you still watch TV, is to go from one channel to another. What's happening on CBS and what's happening on FX are pretty similar. And you begin to wonder, wait, did I hear somebody say shit on NCIS? Maybe I did. Or maybe that was on American Horror Story. I can't be sure.
Right.
So, but they're all commercially sponsored. So it's become one kind of sort of homogenous sort of mess. And with award shows are generally falling apart because now they are so ubiquitous that people are tired of them. They've seen too many of them. And of course, and COVID upended everything because they couldn't actually stage them. So they became a shadow of what they had been. And the audience reflected that.
So because I have someone who has a behind the scenes look at things, I do have to ask, is the conspiracy theory true? Are the award shows political, or is it truly on merit?
Well, listen, first of all, they're not all the same animal. The Oscars are voted on by people who actually make movies. The Emmys are voted on by people who actually do television, and the Tonys are voted on by people who actually work on Broadway, and the Grammys are voted on by people who actually are in the industry. So these are not critics, and these are not Gallup polls. These are people who work in the industry, and this is how they feel. So of course there's going to be some kind of politics, because everybody in any job there's politics. So obviously it's going to be they're going to be favorites for one reason or another. They may not have anything to do with quality. On the other hand, there may be, quality may surface. I mean, when an unknown in this country, Korean actress, wins the Oscar for a part in a movie that was not that well seen outside of the industry, you have to say, how did that happen? Maybe she was good, and maybe they liked the movie. They have no reason to give her. It's not like the South Korean government is paying somebody to vote for her.
We don't know that.
Well, there you go. That's the basis of what we don't know that.
Yeah. No,
Translation. That makes it true. It's like Bill Maher. I don't know this for fact, but I know it's true.
I'm not well versed in the award show, so I will apologize. But the most recent one that you would have written anything for, is there any joke that you couldn't get to fly?
Oh God. Sure. I mean, I have a lot of classic instances of things that we couldn't do. I mean, recently, it's so hard to do anything recently. I mean, and it's not because the network said you can't do it. It's because you self-censor, basically.
You get to the point where you're just used to being told no, and
right. Yeah. So I mean, I will say that there was many years ago when Richard Gere had the gerbil incident, there was a movie. Billy was hosting the Oscars, and there was a movie called An American Tail about Fievel the mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a joke saying Fievel was Richard Gere was going to present tonight with Fievel, but Fievel backed out. And we all loved the joke. And then Richard was in the audience, and for some other thing, and Billy saw him on camera and said, "I can't do that joke. He'll have a stroke. It's not fair." So we cut it. But that's an old classic reference. Now there would be 8 million different ones, but they would all come from us. They wouldn't come from by the time something gets to broadcast, it's been vetted by so many people.
Well, yeah, you have a multitude of colors of rewritten scripts. If I remember correctly from Get Bruce, if you make it to Goldenrod, you're at the bottom of the barrel.
That's true. It's absolutely true, except now, scripts, what? In paper? What? No, we're conserving. Everything is electronic now.
Now, I do have to ask.
Il n'y a pas de Goldenrod.
Now, I do have to ask, since you brought it up, what are your thoughts on streaming? Is it hurting Hollywood? Is it helping Hollywood? Well,
it's helping. I mean, it's created 7 million job opportunities. I mean, it's a golden age for writers because it's got this humongous appetite. Netflix is the home of the shiny object. Every Friday they drop something new. Every time I go to Netflix, some show I've never heard of comes up on screen, and I go, I have to check that out. And after I looked at the thing I went to check out before. So I think, I mean, when you say Hollywood, it certainly is hurting the exhibition business, but I think that there will always be a reason to go to the movies. Once people feel safe going to the movies, which will be in, I guess, a couple more months, depending on variants, the old reasons for going to movies will always be there. People want to get laid, so there's nothing like a date movie, a rom-com, or being in a theater full of people who are scared or people who are laughing. I mean, all of these social things that the theater has always fulfilled, that movies have fulfilled in the more modern age, in a more populist way. That doesn't go away. That need for communication doesn't go away. So it'll be back.
See, I've never been a big fan of the theater experience. I know I'm an outlier, but I have anxiety issues. I have issues with crowds and things like that. And so during COVID, when some of the studios started to do home releases, I really enjoyed that. But
so if I gave you Super Bowl tickets, would you show up?
Nope.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, then you do have anxiety. My God.
Yeah,
You're probably Japanese from another culture.
Nope, a little too well hung to be Japanese.
Doesn't care about Tom Brady retiring.
No, I don't. Well, I'm not a sports guy anyways. But no, it's just even before COVID, I didn't really like going to the theater. I have, like I said, anxiety. I don't like being in crowds. I have cleanliness issues that I'm super, like, I don't like my hands to get dirty and things like that. So when Hollywood started doing the home releases, I really enjoyed that. But then they took it away and they said, well, it's hurting our bottom line, or it's hurting the theaters. And I kept thinking what you just said, the theaters will be fine. There's still going to be those people that enjoy that experience. What did you think about them releasing to home?
Well, at the time, that Warner Brothers was the ones who did it, who made a blanket announcement that all of their 21 releases were going to go onto HBO Max. Mm-hmm. Now, that was a corporate decision because Warner Brothers is owned by Warner Media, which owns HBO. And they were trying to promote HBO Max. They were trying to take on Netflix and Amazon. And so by releasing all those things, and they were making that statement, and Wonder Woman did very well for them. At the time, before vaccines, Wonder Woman was not been a big draw at the movie theater because people were afraid to go. So it was a wise move. As the year progressed and vaccines and boosters, et cetera, came in, it was less of a smart move because people were going to the movies. And now they're done, and they said they're not going to do it again. They're going to go back to a traditional release pattern. But other studios began doing things like putting their movies on the streamer, Disney Plus, and charging a premium to watch it. And it made sense for them because if you have, you can plant 6 kids in front of the TV for $30 and watch Mulan 100 times, and make your own popcorn, not pay for parking, not pay for a sitter for the baby who you had to leave at home. It's much more cost effective for people to do that. So people who needed to do that did that. They made a lot of money off of them. People who could go to the theater went to the theater. So it kind of evened out. So I don't think that the enemy is the streamers. I think the enemy is COVID.
I know Scarlett Johansson and Disney got in, or Marvel and Disney got into a scuff up because of the streaming and whatnot.
Well, because it affects everybody's back end. I mean, these big stars make deals, and the back end is calibrated and calculated on the theatrical release, and the theatrical release was non-existent.
Well, is the back end, do you see it being modified for future releases? Because not have streaming written into the contract seems silly.
I think the contracts are being rewritten altogether. And there are new paradigms, which is the name of my agency, by the way. There are new paradigms that are going into it. So it's, you don't hear other people belly aching about this right now because Scarlett took the hit for it.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah. And like I said, I enjoyed being able to sit at home and watch my favorite movies or the things that I wanted to see. I know, again, I am a very small minority, so nobody's going to listen to me. All right, Bruce, it's time to play Interview Roulette.
Oh, good.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So before we got started, I had you pick 5 random numbers, and I've got the questions that correspond to them. The first number you picked was 247. Do you have any favorite stories from your childhood?
Any favorite what?
Stories from your childhood.
Do I have any favorite stories from my childhood? No. Nothing I can share now. After an hour of this, no. I don't. I mean, and if they are, they're going to be in the book that I'm writing. So there you go.
Oh, when's your writing?
I have nothing. I have no.
Okay,
well,
cool.
I'll be back to plug it when it's ready.
Hey, I'm just happy you want to come back.
Okay.
If you can instill one piece of advice into the youth of America, what would it be?
Be ready. They say luck is preparation equal an opportunity. When preparation meets opportunity, so it's be ready. Just if you have an idea in mind of what you want to do, bone up, prepare yourself for it. Get ready for whatever you have to do. Don't show up unprepared for anything.
It's good advice. When people look in your eyes, what do you hope they see?
The beauty of the ages. But what they probably see is astigmatism. But I guess, I mean, what they see when we look in anyone's eyes, which is the real thing, the soul.
It's a good answer. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups or Reese's Pieces?
Neither. Chuckles gumdrops. Juicy, jujubes, juicy fruit. I'm a gumdrop guy, and I have the dental records to prove it.
All right, and the last bit for Interview Roulette. Were you voted most likely for anything in your class yearbook?
No, I was voted most talented, actually. Cynthia Schramm, who was a cheerleader, and I were voted most talented because there was a girl and a boy. I don't think we had a most likely to succeed. I think even back then, that was sort of considered a little de trop, a little judgmental. I mean, and not based on anything. It was just like a hunch, and it was kind of like a death sentence. I mean, because suppose you didn't wind up like that, Suppose you wound up, ODing in college. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, that's just all you need to vote then, most likely then.
But we had, I was most talented. I would have been class clown, but there was Eddie Baldinger who was hysterical and would do face plants in the playground and stuff. So not me.
And then I got one last question for you, just because I know quite a few of my listeners are writers or have the affinity for it. One piece of advice for anyone trying to get into comedy writing.
Be funny. You'd be amazed at how many people are not funny and think, oh, this is going to be hilarious. Be funny. And the other, but a serious piece of advice, because I assume you're not really looking to get into it unless you are funny, seriously, is be ready to give it away for free at the beginning. You have to give it away, and and that's how you network. And it is unfortunately all about knowing people and being funny. But being funny is the number one. Having a real point of view, having a sense of fun. And I get a lot of when I first went to Hollywood, I got scripts from everybody I worked with at newspapers. Comedy scripts about funny things they weren't funny. These guys were not funny guys who were writing these things. So that's it.
All right, Bruce, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Absolutely. I will come back and be odd anytime. We'll be an odd couple.